Okay, so closing out with this one, and again, I know this stuff may seem kind of like off topic. I hope it's not too far off into the woods. I just wanted to do this just because this overall theme is here are the five key issues that keep all of us from being fully present and being fully engaged. Here are the five key issues that consistently stop us from getting where we want to go. These are the five key issues that most often damage our relationships and most often damage our goals and what we want to do in our lives. Like literally, it boils down to these five things. And so that's why I thought like it's useful to at least raise some level of awareness about these five things because these are the five things that like cause us the most trouble, whether we recognize it or not. And so now we're coming to the last one. This is a trauma survival style called the love and sexuality survival style. And going into this, I think it'll make more sense as I just dive into it. So this is a survival style where like love and sexuality are not integrated, and I'll talk a little bit more about like because there are like some massive repercussions for that failure to integrate those two things, and like it impacts us in ways that we might not even recognize. Like it would impact us in like it's some things that would seem to be unrelated are actually heavily affected by this. So it starts when people learn to base their self-worth on looks and performance. All you have to do is just go to social media or turn on the TV, and you will see a barrage of these type of people whose entire sense of self-worth is based on performing well and looking good. You know, winning and looking good doing it. The people who are very focused on that tend to be folks who have this sort of developmental problem. I love Talladega Nights, The Battle of Ricky Bobby. It was one of my favorite movies. It's definitely a comfort show I watch. It's a great comedy. I love this particular Will Ferrell movie. Um, and this character that he plays, Ricky Bobby, is the hallmark, like it's a great, funny slapstick sort of example of the person who has this developmental trauma. And it's actually funny enough, surprisingly accurate. Like the way they tell his story is exaggerated, of course, but it's exactly like a person who has this love and sexuality survival style. Um, it's what they would go through and how they behave. So one sign of this person is they tend to have black and white thinking about themselves, and so you're only as good as your last win, and that was definitely like the Ricky Bobby mentality. Like he's a NASCAR driver, and like his whole self worth was based on each race he won. Um, he had to consistently be the winner, and he also had to consistently look good. He had a hot trophy wife, and blah 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 blah. This style develops through heartbreak. At some point, they had their loved deeply, a deep love. They felt it rejected or ignored, and so this character had that happen with his father. The movie starts out showing a young Ricky Bobby um, on career day, and his dad comes in, doesn't really care, shows up late, ends up getting arrested, and like runs. His dad just runs off and leaves him, and he's like heartbroken. He always wanted his father's approval, but his dad was just like an irresponsible alcoholic. And you see how that rejection um, turns Ricky Bobby into this person like who has to be a winner. Like he just has to be, the champ, because so that he's not rejected anymore. Um, and so that's where we start off, right? So usually this pattern develops when you have a child that's or a young person who's already seen that their love is conditional, they can be rejected. Um, and then you add on to that is that this rejection happens around their sexual awakening, especially around puberty. Um, and so, for before puberty, a young person sees love and sexuality. They don't see a distinction. So, and maybe sexuality is the wrong word, but like affection and intimacy. All right. So, like hugs and kisses, um, that's for a young person. Before they had a sexual awakening, like love includes everything. Love includes saying I love you, it includes being nice, but it also includes like physical affection, intimacy. All of it is just couched in this overall concept of love. And it's not until the sexual awakening happens around puberty where they become more conscious of their bodies, or they become more conscious of even the concept of the birds and the bees and all this sort of stuff. That's when, suddenly that affectionate and that physical part of love becomes like scary or shameful or bad or whatever. And that creates like a profound impact on the rest of their lives. This especially happens among women and the LGBT population. And so, just an example, like particularly when girls, go through their sexual changes, that there's a lot of sort of shaming and condemnation that happens to them in particular. They got to make sure they don't dress in any way that's going to be provocative. Their worth a lot of times is tied to their attractiveness to young boys or men. Um, and that carries on into adulthood. Like a lot of too much, actually, some would say, of feminine identity is centered around being attractive or appealing um, to the male population. And a lot of women, especially in certain cultures, they can get shamed a lot around their body and their sexuality. Um, or you have it outright denied, as a woman, especially a younger woman, um, that part of you shouldn't even exist. You shouldn't even be thinking about that. We don't say that with young boys, but with girls in particular, part of being a good girl or a good young lady or a respectable young lady, I'm using air quotes, is that you've completely suppressed or denied, or you're not even thinking about your sexual identity. That shouldn't even be on the table. And so that teaches them that sexuality and their sexual identity is shameful. And that, of course, also happens with the gay and lesbian population a lot, where it's, your emergent sexuality as it shows same-sex attraction, that's shameful. And that's, and some people would say that's evil. It's flat out evil, so obviously it needs to be banished. And so overall, the result is these people experience love as being conditional and sexuality as being shameful, and that has a lifelong impact on how they relate to their own bodies and how they form intimate relationships. And I threw this slide in here really just to underscore how important that actually is. The Mass Psychology of Fascism is this novel by a psychoanalyst, Wilhelm Reich, who wrote this after World War II. Um, Nazi Germany caused, obviously a lot of atrocity and damage. And so, as a psychologist, you're like, well, what's going on so that this doesn't happen again? I think the world was kind of like, how do we stop this from happening again? And so, you're just from a psychologist perspective, an actual reason for fascism and, a fascist regime like there was in Germany and Italy is because of the suppression of sexuality. Um, and so how these authoritarian people come into power through political and ideological sexual repression. And he goes into, like, believe it or not, that's actually what undergirds and supports a lot of this worldwide violence and murder and catastrophe. Um, and he offers that argument that this is the base, underneath everything, this is actually like the key issue um, that helped facilitate the destruction of World War II. And he's not the only person to say that. There have actually since been a bunch of studies that have actually shown there's actually a correlation when you take cultures that are sexually repressive or put a lot of rules around gender roles, like, a man has to be this way, a woman has to be this way. Those tend to be the same cultures that have higher rates of violence. And as it gets on a larger scale, those are the cultures that have a lot of war. I highly recommend this book by Mona Eltahawy. I may have butchered her last name, but it's why the Middle East needs a sexual revolution. She's a feminist activist from the Middle East who sort of just it was very eye opening, like just tying in that culture that sort of demonizes women and subjugates women, and especially sexuality, female sexuality, um, that definitely has a relationship to why out here we see so much war and conflict as well. And so I just wanted to underscore the point that this actually this stuff actually does impact a lot of areas of our life and our culture. So ultimately, these people will relate from feeling either love or feeling sexuality, but they cannot integrate both. And so, a hallmark of these folks is that they cannot maintain romantic relationships. Romantic relationships will present a significant lifelong challenge for them. And cheating is a common pattern. They will either find themselves being cheated on repeatedly, or they will find themselves cheating on their partners repeatedly, like or both. But they will usually end up in this repeated cycle of an unfaithful partner, whether that is them or their partner. So from chakra perspective, you could say like the heart and the sacral cannot be open at the same time, and they don't work together. They actually fight each other. Um, Love and libido are not integrated. So back to this like cheating thing. Why is that the case? Why is that, the issue? It stems from not being able to maintain, both sexual feelings and loving feelings simultaneously. In men, that failure to integrate love and sexuality shows up as something called the Madonna whore complex. And so men with this complex, they see women in one of these two categories. This woman is either this angel over here who, I can't see as sexual. That's the idealized woman. That's the woman that's like, I see as my mother or my sister or, a good girl or, a respectable woman. I can't feel sexual feelings for that type of person. She's an angel. And then over here, you have, the devil. This is the girl where that man will unload his sexual feelings, but he also will not feel respect for her. And so this is the side piece, what's a good way to put this? Like Rick James said, the kind you don't bring home to mother. This is the woman who gets his sexual energy. And so, but the complex here is that like women are complex being, and normally if we're integrated, I could see, oops, I could see a woman as both of these things. But like, and hopefully this is making sense. Let me know if it's not. But to the extent, let's say I have this woman over here with the horns and tail, the devil. This is the type of woman where a man with this complex, his sexual energy will be open, and they will have a sort of physically intimate vitality. It'll be present, it'll be there, but he doesn't respect this woman. He doesn't see her as a person worthy of love. So his heart is closed to this woman, if that makes sense, right? So like his lust is open, but his heart is closed, and it will never change. Like she will always be in this category to him. Whereas over here, where you're looking at the angel, this woman, his heart is open to this woman. He loves her, but his lust is closed. And so you'll see in a relationship, let's say if he's dating this kind of woman, because this is the type of woman he would actually date or marry, you'll see a couple of things happen where, like, as his heart opens to her, his lust closes, and so they stop becoming intimate. And you see that complaint a lot, where it's like the physical intimacy has gradually left the relationship as he begins to show or feel more love and respect for her. And as that intimacy leaves, he'll eventually go out a lot of times and find this woman who's just outside of the relationship, where he's able to actually reignite and offload that sexual energy that he's not giving over here to this like angelic person. Let me know if that doesn't make sense. I don't know if I explained that too well, but like the idea is that there's this split. He cannot integrate loving feelings and sexual feelings towards the same woman. That's the Madonna whore complex. And so, with this issue, this split, this disintegration, you're going to get these two types that kind of track what I was just talking about. On one hand, you'll have the loving and romantic type. This is the person who will be open-hearted, but they're disconnected from their sexuality. So early on in the stages of relationships, they can feel a sexual intimacy, but as the relationship deepens, as they progress, and their feelings get involved, and their heart begins to open for each other, we love each other, we respect each other, we see eye to eye. This is the point where sexual, feelings begin to diminish, and so the relationship will either end or one person will start cheating, and that's where this idea of like these are the people who end up with cheating going on in some form or another. It's because of this. All right, so that's the loving type. They're open-hearted, but they're disconnected from the part of them that is sexual. Just to score that, like sex, it's kind of confusing the way we treat it because it's so ubiquitous. Like literally, all of us are here right now because someone had sex. Like that's just how life works. Like I have my dog in the other room. My dog is, here right now because two chihuahuas had sex. Like but these type of people like suppress it, deny it, don't want to talk about it, don't even want to look at it. Um, and yeah, so that's one type. The other type is the sexual impersonal type. Described that a little bit earlier, where the person can become seductive or hypersexualized, but there's no real love, no real, actual emotional intimacy. It's just like shallow physical connection. This is the person that's the hookup, the mistress, whatever. Um, and so, in those types of people, the people who carry that type of persona, they'll have this hypersexualized persona, but it is a persona. And they do that in order to avoid real intimacy because you're not actually getting to know the real person. They will often find attractive partners and they will have shallow, intimate relationship, and they'll be a little bit more promiscuous. They can also have, if they're not outwardly promiscuous, they can have pornography addictions. So they're excessively, looking at porn, which kind of perpetuates this idea of like impersonal sexuality, non-loving intimacy. A lot of porn these days is like there's no personalization or love present in it at all, right? But ironically, because of that, they tend not to have fulfilling sexual encounters, even though they're promiscuous. They're actually alienated from deep pleasure because there's no personal intimacy in their relationships. All right, so how do we get past this? Because again, this does, believe it or not, it impacts a lot of life outside of the topic of love and sexuality. A lot of people who feel like energy-wise, like I don't get things done, and so talking about that autonomy style previously, like they're not active, they're not doing. Um, a lot of that surprisingly can boil down to you're looking at a person who has not integrated love and sexuality. Um, because that a healthy integrated person who has actually integrated those two things, they tend to have more like energy. They tend to have more productivity in their lives, and they actually tend to, go out and accomplish a lot more. So believe it or not, like a lot of those high level problems actually stem from this like basic thing, like not having this key integration. So, moving past it, we want to deal with feelings of rejection or shame. Because remember, even like from the Ricky Bobby example, that's what started this. You have a young person who like opened their heart and loved in some form or another, but had their love shamed or condemned, especially when their puberty or sexuality emerge, right? Like, so normally, when I'm developing healthily, as I go through puberty and become begin to form a sexual identity, I'm still able to do that with an open heart, just the same way like I've been able to go through every other developmental stage of my life with an open heart and no one shamed me or condemned me. When I was potty training and going through that stage in my life, no one shamed me or condemned me. Like, we don't shame kids for learning how to go to the bathroom on their own. And so I normally, as sexuality develops, that pattern would continue. The same way we didn't shame them when they were learning how to poop on their own, we don't shame them when they're learning about their bodies and learning about the idea of sex and sexuality. Um, and so when they don't get shamed, they don't have that part of them rejected, they're able to maintain this open heart that says, well, I'm loved unconditionally. All parts of me are loved. Um, all parts of my development have been met with love. But here, when it talks about sexual awakening, that's in that area where like that goes away. It's something about sex is where like, oh, nope, nope, nope. Now we're meeting with shame. Now we're meeting with rejection. Um, and so to heal from that, you kind of have to go back to the ways they have been shamed or rejected and allow love to take the place of that. Um, and yeah, and so yeah, when it's integrated, these people tend to be very productive and busy. But on the other end of that, sometimes their productivity is a way to avoid dealing with their feelings. And so sometimes they need to stop the busyness, center themselves, be alone, and just feel their feelings, because that's something they tend to avoid. And fear of vulnerability. This most often shows up in a refusal to make repair attempts. So, John Gottman, who's a relationship and love expert, he had this finding that, the people who stay together for the longest time, the couples that last long term, they're not the couples that get along. They're not the couples that don't fight. In fact, some of these long-term relationships, the couples fight every day. Like we've all seen the married couple where they're constantly fighting each other and arguing each other. So it doesn't have to do with that. What makes a relationship last romantically is the ability to repair. So once you've had the fight, once you've had the argument or the fallout, how do you make up with each other? How do you repair each other? How do we repair and get back to being in a good place? People with this survival style struggle on the repair part, and that's actually the most important thing. They're the least likely to reach out and say, I'm sorry, or to reach out and say, hey, can we talk? Or can we come back together and make this right? Um, they have a fear of vulnerability. You could call it pride, but it shows up very commonly in a refusal to do that. And, I need you to reach out to me. I need you to come apologize to me if we're going to make the repair. I need you to be the one to initiate us becoming to a good place again. Because I'm not going to do it. I can't do it. So moving past that, and then here's a closing quote that was from the psychologist who started this modality. He said, "Love sexuality types feel in jeopardy of getting their hearts broken if they love deeply. But here's the key message. The rejection they fear is actually both a memory of that early rejection they felt, as a child, and also a reflection of how rejecting they are of themselves. And that last line there is also, a key realization for healing. Recognize the way you have become rejecting of yourself. So I'm so worried about being rejected by this other person or becoming across as, you know, perfect and desirable or the one with the upper hand because I don't want to face rejection. Well, actually, what I need to do is recognize, well, actually, I've already felt that rejection because I'm doing it to myself. Um, they have a tendency to confuse admiration for love. And so, they might attract partners where it's like, if I present this persona of like, I'm beautiful, I'm gorgeous in every way, and I'm a winner, I'm accomplished, I'm thinking about, let's say, like a Kim Kardashian. Um, she's, the, you know, perfect in every way. I have the money, I have the looks, I have the fame, the fortune, blah blah blah. You'll attract someone who admires you and admires that, but they don't necessarily love you. They admire what you have, they admire what you do, they admire your social status, but that's a whole separate thing from love. And yeah, that's really the where this last line comes in. Love that is based on looks and performance is not actually love. And so that's just like an entire realization that has to happen in order for this survival style to heal. I think that's it. All right, so done with all of these. Thank you for listening. Hopefully, some of this was helpful. I have the slides, in case at any point you ever want to go back and look at some of this stuff. But the overall theme is like these are very five key areas that block us from being our best selves. So I'm just offering this that, hopefully, if you ever get to a point where it's like, I'm not being my best self, I'm not really progressing the way I want to, and I'm ready to, move on and move forward to my next level. A good place to start is to just look at one of these five issues because, according to, the researchers, these particular therapists, their idea is that like, all right, it's probably because you're dealing with one of these five core issues, and that is what's blocking you from getting to your next level.